Hello and welcome to the Risky Business Podcast. I'm Sam Stone. I'm sitting down with people who I have seen take big risks in their life. My goal is to encourage you, challenge you, and push you to take a risk, whatever that may be in your life. Risky business. Let's get risky. Here we go.
Put in work, got so much potential, it hurts. If y'all do not wake up, then y'all gon' get hurt.
All right. Hello and welcome back to the Risky Business Podcast. I'm very excited for today's episode. Before we get rolling on this, wanted to give you a little bit of update. We've had some exciting meetings over the last month about growing this podcast, getting it out to more people on more platforms. And I'm learning a lot as we go just with the podcast and how I can do the best job I can do. So we hit, for the first time last month, 100,000 people reached on Instagram alone, which was very exciting for us. And so thank you so much for sharing it out. If you hear an episode or you go back and listen to an old episode and it's something that you meant a lot to you or that you learned from, I would really love it if you could share that out with somebody, send it to somebody, and that's how these things grow. So I'm super excited for today's guest. If you're sitting here and you're listening and you're like, oh, I know somebody who I want to have on the podcast, that's how I found it. Ryan wasn't the one who sent me his name, but somebody sent me his name and was like, hey, you need to sit down with Ryan. So if you have somebody that you think that should be on the podcast, let me know, shoot me a message. And I would love to dig into that. So super excited for today's episode. If you are a Louisville resident, I know a lot of the listeners are Louisville residents. We have a man who has cut a lot of hair in Louisville and also taken a lot of risk and brought in a lot of risk to build something that's really cool. So if you're in Louisville and St. Matthews and Middletown, you've heard of Handsome Fellows. I've actually never had my hair cut there.
That's a shame.
I went in a couple times and I didn't realize it was like you couldn't just walk in and just sit down. Maybe you can sometimes,
dagger.
But you guys are doing such a great job. You're booked out. And so, Ryan Cornell, thanks for sitting down from Handsome Fellows. So thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Oh, of course, man. I was pulling in and I was like, I was a little late. You beat me here, which is not super surprising. I wasn't late. I was at 9 o'clock even, but you
Right
beat
on
me
time.
here. And you had a social media thing posted up about it. I was like, oh, let's go. This is awesome.
That's
So,
right.
Thank you,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah, I've been really excited to be on here with you and share the story. And we're gonna get you in the shop. We gotta
I
get
can't
you a
wait.
clean
Yeah, I need.
cut, man.
I was thinking this morning. I was getting ready. My wife was asking. I was taking a little extra time on the hair because anytime you sit down with the barber, you got to make sure the hair looks good.
I'm already judging, man. It's all good. It looks good.
No, my barber's great. I've been to him for a few years. So I saw a stat the other day. You might be able to.
Okay.
You might be able to lean in on this, and it was a very sad stat. But it said that. Have you heard of it?
I already know what you're gonna say. Go ahead.
Somebody said that millennial men are more likely to be loyal to their barber than their significant other.
Yeah,
And I was like,
too.
that is wild.
That is a sad stat. I
is-
suppose it's good for us, but the overall race as well. That's probably not the best stat.
No, not a good stat. But in your all's world, you obviously love clients that are happy, get a good haircut, and come back. So tell us about Handsome Fellows. Tell us about yourself. And we haven't met before today, so I'm
No.
excited to learn
No.
and learn about you. So
Yeah. Well, just I guess a little background. I grew up in Fern Creek, so I know Jay Wagner.
Oh,
He
yeah.
said, he's a Fern Creeker, so
Oh,
he
yeah.
was proud to drop that. And same here, so we got a couple of Creekers on here. But grew up there, went to Fern Creek High. I grew up in a house where education was always preached.
mhm.
And hey, you're expected to get all A's. You're expected to go to school every day unless you're sick or dying. And you show up, you put the work in, and that was always the expectation. And that's a great expectation, from a childhood. And after high school, I was able to get an academic scholarship. Went down the road to Richmond, Kentucky, and went to EKU. And I first declared accounting. I thought I wanted to be an accountant. I
Really?
took one accounting class, did a balance sheet, said this is not for me. So pivoted.
Are you good at Excel?
I just liked math.
Okay.
Like most kids,
Yeah.
Then and still today, it's a huge expectation to know what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're an 18-year-old kid.
That always was the frustrating thing for me.
Yeah.
You're like freshman year of college, everybody's like, so what are you studying? Which I've
Right.
probably asked the question to
Right.
people, but it's like, oh, what are you studying? And it's like, man, I have no clue. I went to school to be a
Right.
pastor. I went
Right.
to 6 years of college to be a pastor and
Yeah.
didn't know exactly what I was going to do.
Right.
And am obviously not doing that now. But
Well, you know, a lot of kids feel compelled to say something that they think sounds impressive. I want to be a physical therapist. I'm going to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. And maybe the intent's there, maybe it's not. But there's a lot of pressure because all the parents and all the elderly figures around you are always asking you, what are you going to do with your life? It's hard. It's big shoes to fill. So anyway, I thought, hey, let's start there, right? And then quickly pivoted, just decided to get a business management degree. And that was a good move, especially in hindsight now, because I got exposed to a lot of different classes. I got to do marketing, did entrepreneurship course, obviously while we're here now. We did real estate, computer information systems, branding, you name it. And so that was really good. You're kind of like a jack of all trades and master of none. But graduated there, and first big crossroad, what are you going to do now? You got your 4-year degree. And, the two routes are I'm going to hop in the job pool and get a job and start my life, my career, or two, maybe more education. For a lot of people, if they get that degree and they don't really know what's next, or they can't really figure out a job that they think would be good, the answer was, I'm just going to go get a master's now. And then, you're going to end up more debt, and that's a slippery slope. Good enough for me. I was able to find a pretty good job coming out with a pretty large corporation. And, but immediately, within 6 months, I didn't really like it that much.
Yeah.
And I was already thinking about, hey, maybe this really isn't for me, this corporate world. And, I started going to Seminole to take classes for real estate.
Oh, no way.
So I thought
Really?
about doing real estate. Yeah. I mean, the course that I took in college always intrigued me. I thought that the field was super interesting. And about halfway through that, something happened that made me stick with the job I had. And I started making money, and that's the first pit, right? Where people start to get stuck. And I started making really good money, and I said, well, maybe I should stick with this thing. I'm young. It gave me a lot of autonomy. Commission checks were good. I was doing sales. So I just kept going down that route. And, next thing you know, 4 years had passed and I needed a fresh start, went to another sales job. And this happened for 4 or 5 times, always in sales. I love the relationship side of sales, but I was more in a churn and burn. You got to go out and hunt for your meal every day sales role. And, high level of rejection, extreme rejection. And for me, I'm not wired that way. There are some people that could go in there and get rejected, a door slammed on them, a phone slammed down, and it doesn't bother them one bit. They just go to the next door and knock on it. For me, I got to go home and soak my wounds, and man, I got to get revved up to do this tomorrow. I can't do it today.
Yeah.
And so I knew that wasn't the be all end all for me. But what was happening is I was progressively getting jobs at smaller and smaller companies. Until the last job I had was a small IT startup here. The old CEO of Churchill Downs had started it. There were 4 of us. I said, let's do it, man. Let's get boots on the ground on this place. Unfortunately, it didn't make it, like most small businesses.
Yeah.
I thought there was some leadership challenges. There was really a lack of clarity and vision on what I was supposed to be doing, what I was supposed to be marketing, and who I was marketing to. And then there were issues with after I would sell an account, how do we deliver that? And the whole time I'm thinking in the back of my head, I don't know if this guy knows what he's doing. I think I could probably do this, and the company went under, and it was at a big second crossroads for me where, hey, am I going to continue down this path of sales, dispirited role, not overly fulfilling life, or am I going to pivot again? And this was also the first time in my life that leaving where I was working was not on my terms. The company went under, so I got dumped kind of, right? And what a weird feeling.
Forced reset.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's when I went to the drawing board. And at that time, I started going and getting a haircut down in New Loop. And there was a shop that had opened. It's called Market Street Barbers. And man, it was a vibe. It was so cool. It was unlike any other shop I'd ever been to in my life. Grew up going to Highview Barbershop, went to small mom and pops in college. This place had the music going, it had the motorcycle in the window. It was electric. it was just electric going in there. Enough that I said, hey, I want to base my day around this now. I'm going to come get a cut once a month. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to work at Please and Thank You. I'm going to go over and get my hair cut. Then I'm going to grab some lunch. I'm going to do some work meetings with some people. But at the core of that was my haircut, was the experience, you know, and for that 30 minutes, I felt amazing, you know? So I started thinking, maybe I want to be a part of this movement.
Mm-hmm.
Barbershops were getting cool again. It wasn't just a place to go and do a quick haircut. It was a place to go in there and have camaraderie,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like we always talk about camaraderie, community, talking. It wasn't a transaction.
Mm-hmm.
It was a full experience. And so I started looking into barber school, and I looked into some other trades too. And my plan at that time was, well, I'm going to learn a trade.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to learn a skill, and then I'm going to open up my own business. So, you know, looked at electrical, looked at welding, looked at HVAC, plumbing, you know, but always came back to barbering. And because the barriers to entry in that field are fairly minimal.
Mm-hmm.
Once you go to school and you've got a skill, you can go off with the ground running. So I decided to do barbering. And
What year was this?
gosh, this was 2015. So I had just turned 30. Didn't have kids at the time. This was the right time in my life to make a pivot, to take a risk,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's where it begins. But a calculated risk. And I know several of the guests on your pod have talked about, hey, you know, we're not going to be reckless with this. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to take a calculated risk. And, you know, the cost to go to school was super minimal. It was like $6,500. We had to do 1,500 hours to go to barber school, which equates to 10 and a half months if you're going full time. For me, it's like, hey, I'm going to try this out. If it works, awesome. If it
Mhm.
doesn't, it's not the end of the world. You know, when I was thinking about going to get my master's, it was going to be 40 grand. And I wasn't necessarily going to be in a better place
Mm-hmm.
from an employability standpoint having a master's. It almost hamstrings you so much as you don't want to take any job out there because you're like, well, hey, man, I got a master's.
Mhm.
I should be making $100K, right? And they're like, well, you don't have any experience,
Mm-hmm.
but I got a master's, right?
Yeah.
That's, you know, that model that's always preaching to is, hey, education, education, education. You know, if you don't have it, you're not going to be successful. And that's just, it's not the case anymore. But
And I think
regardless-
I want to say one thing in there of you hit on it early, and I don't want to get too far past it. A lot of people I've talked to who listen to this, they sit there and say, you know, like they are in that mode of early college where
Mhm.
you hit on it very early on you feel like you have to almost have a job that's going to impress somebody,
Right.
and saying a trade is not something that people, you know what I mean? Like, talk about, I work in real estate, and I work with a lot of people who work in trades. You want to talk about the fastest way to make six figures? Be good at any single trade, and you can make that very quickly. If you are somebody who answers your phone, does what you say you're going to do, that's the fastest way to make it,
Yes.
for sure, in today's world that I've seen. And so I think it's almost a good challenge for somebody who's listening, who's saying like, man, I don't know the direction I want to go in, but I feel like whether it be pressure from parents or pressure from
Right.
family or friends, or, you know, that friend that wants to be a doctor, and that's fantastic, we need doctors, or a lawyer, and that's fantastic, we need lawyers. But
Right.
I say it with a grain of salt because college was my favorite time, and it was really fun to, you know, I told somebody the other day, I was meeting with a guy for coffee, and I was like, man, if I could just press pause and come back in 1 year and like just come to where I am now,
Yeah.
I would press pause for a year and go back to college for a year in
Right.
in a heartbeat, because it was so much fun. So I'd never want to tell somebody, hey, just like skip college completely and go
Definitely.
do something different. But if you're not packing your tool belt while you're in college with prep, whether it be listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, learning in different ways, in today's world, like you hit on, you walking out with a college degree does not mean the same thing that it did 20 years ago. And so
Right.
if you're not actively gaining interest and knowledge in a field that you want to pursue one day,
Mhm.
I feel like that's something a lot of people can miss out on, and a risk that you can take pretty easily at a young age, which
Right.
obviously you were, I know you said you went through 4 or 5 different jobs and roles in sales, but I feel like not even knowing your story, but just seeing what you've built in the end with Handsome Fellows, you had to take a lot from those 4
Right.
to 5 businesses that you that maybe went well, didn't go well, or the rejection you had
Right.
during those hard conversations.
Oh, yeah.
And take that into, okay, now I see why Handsome Fellows is succeeding because of the hard things you walk through.
Right. Yeah, and I want to say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with education. You know, it's definitely got merit
Mm-hmm.
in teaching you work ethic. You got to show up on time. You got to hold yourself accountable. And like you, I enjoyed every one of my 4 years at college. It was a great time in my life. I learned a lot about myself, you know? So there are different paths. There's different ways to get to the finish line, and you can't say that one is better than another. But if you do lack some vision, if you're like, hey, I'm just going to go, even though I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you might want to reevaluate a little bit. But yeah, I just wanted to add that to it. And a lot of times I'll look back, you know, I was 30 when I went to barber college, and I was like, man, I wish I would have started this when I was 20. You know, where could I be
Yeah,
now
of course.
if I had another 10 years? But the reality of it is that I wasn't the same person
Mm-hmm.
when I was 20 that I am when I was 30. You know, I hadn't, like you said, I didn't have those battle scars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it takes a lot of grit to pick yourself up every single day if you're doing a job you don't want to do, and you got to go out there and you got to deliver, right? And that added a lot to my resiliency, especially the early parts of the barbershop. Those 10 years of just grinding it out in the
Mhm.
trenches, and maybe not necessarily doing what I wanted to do, but hey, I'm going to find my path one way or another, you know, and not give up.
Oh, one of my favorite quotes is best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, second best time's today. And it's like, it's
Man.
so easy to look back and say, oh man, I thought the same thing. Man, if I would have gotten into real estate right out of high school, where would I be now? Or right out of college, wherever I'd be now.
Right.
But I take the things jobs that I had previously and say, okay, the things that I learned in that prepared me for this.
Right.
And so you cut hair. You started off cutting hair in 2015. Did you cut at a shop? Or did you start completely
you
your
start
own
barber
thing?
school, and pretty much, man, you're going there and you're doing haircuts day one.
Mhm.
And, you know, I remember I had some real reservations when I went and talked to the owner of the school, Tri-City Barber College. It's been around. It's the longest barber college in the nation, actually.
In
So it's got a
Kentucky?
lot of history. No, in the U.S.
But I mean, is it in Kentucky?
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
It's over
wow.
off South Preston near U of L's campus. And I remember I sat down with him. I said, hey, I'm not artistic. He's like, you don't have to be. He's like, you played sports your whole life, right? I said, yeah. He said, same thing, man. You have bad free throw percentage, go up, shoot 100 free throws a day. Your free throw percentage is going to get better. He said, you just practice. I said, okay. But I remember the first day I go in there, I don't have tools, I don't have anything. And this big lumbering guy walks in, a young guy, and he's like, hey, Ryan, you want to grab this guy?
You're like, no.
Oh, okay. I said, Steve, I don't have any tools. He said, go over there and work with Devin. He'll help you. I said, okay. You know, this guy sits down. He ends up, he's like a linebacker from the U of L's football team. And he doesn't want a hard haircut, okay? He just wants like a 4 on top and a 2 on the sides. I mean, by most standards, that's the easiest haircut you can do. But I've never cut hair. And now I'm like, this guy's going to eat me for lunch if I mess his haircut up, you know? Anyway, so I get the neck strip to wrap around it, and you know, I'm kind of shaking while I put it around. Well, his neck's so big, the neck strip breaks. You know, it's just a piece of cotton. I'm like, he's like, gives me another one. I go around, I can't fit this
Like
around
tying
his
them
neck,
together?
Devin, you know? Yeah. Anyway, made it through the haircut. It was fine, but you know, hey, when there's cold water in the pool, the easiest way is not to dip your toe in.
Mhm.
It's just to jump in. So that's what we did, and you know, did that through school. I was locked in, you know, and I had a lot of support from family and friends. I had a buddy that came in the first week, you know, and he wanted a haircut, and you know, we knew it wasn't gonna be perfect, but I was gonna be earnest and I was gonna do the best I could, and he was there to support me. And
Isn't that so cool? I feel like that
Yeah.
is in every single person who's taken a risk. There's always and you remember it so clearly too. I think
Right.
the first people that used me in real estate when I was new and I was asking questions and still learning how to open the lock boxes and all the things.
right,
And you think back to those people and it's like, man, that means so much. And so a
Absolutely.
challenge for somebody listening, if you got a friend who's starting something, you know, and whether it be a barbershop or starting cutting hair or a
Yeah.
lawn mowing business, you know what I mean? Like if you can, especially small businesses in Kentucky, I feel like Louisville does a good job of
yeah,
loving on small businesses. I'm sitting here drinking an Alani, which is no longer a small business, but a Louisville company, and it's like, and I go home in my Shady Rays, and you know what I mean? Like, Louisville loves supporting local businesses and seeing that grow, and so I feel like it's just a challenge today. When whatever you're doing, go out and support somebody that's A, local, B, might be just starting off, because you'll never know that 10 years down the road, you still remember your buddy sitting there saying, you know, it might not be the most perfect haircut, but I'd love to, I'd love for you to help practice on me, and it'll grow back out.
That's it, man. That's it. And, you know, I had tons of friends come out of the woodwork, people I hadn't seen in years too, that just were following me on social media that were like, hey, I want to come and get a cut. And, you know, sometimes people want the opportunity, but you got to put it out there too, that you're doing it. You got to expose yourself and make yourself a little vulnerable. And that was me growing my own personal brand and my own personal business. And that rings very differently. Your effort is different when you're doing it for yourself versus XYZ company, you know?
And that's so true on putting yourself out there.
Right.
And giving people the opportunity to support you.
Yep.
If people don't know about it, they can't support you.
Right.
And that's the hardest thing on just saying like, hey, I'm, you know, somebody in real estate, it's one of the ways that you can grow a business early is sit there and say, hey, I challenge people, write a note to your 10 or 15 closest people and say, hey, I'm starting a business, and if I don't have your support, it's going to fail. And so I would love to have your support. Yeah. And, you know, in your world, jumping in and putting yourself out there and giving yourself the opportunity for people to support, and having the guts to do it. Cause you know, there's always going to be people, there's a Andy Elliott quote, which he's an interesting character. So take or leave it however you want to, but he has a quote that's one of my favorites. It's, people are going to laugh when you start, people are going to laugh at you. They're going to make fun of you. And then when you succeed, they're going to ask you how you did it, and they're going to ask you to be their mentor.
Man, right.
Like, it's
Heavy
true.
Truth. Heavy
it's so
truth.
true. It's nobody wants to start at the beginning, you know? And
no, and they don't see the failure and the behind the scenes, you know, the grind of it all. I think more people are a little bit better about putting that out there, exposing their vulnerabilities these days, probably more than other. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So you know, here I am cutting hair, and I'm locked in, man. I'm locked in every day. I'm like, I'm only going to get out what I put into this. And, you know, there's about 25 people in school at the same time. A lot of kids coming out of high school that didn't know what they wanted to do, that maybe parents urged them to. But there was nobody else in there with me, like me, that was like, hey, man, I know what I'm doing. You know, I'm coming in here. I got my blinders on. You're not going to reel me into long smoke breaks. I'm not leaving here for 2-hour lunches. I'm here to cut hair, and I'm here to get good at it. And
that's awesome.
Right. And you know, about a month before I was getting ready to graduate, I had an opportunity locked up to go work at a shop down on Frankfurt Avenue. And the owner of the school calls me in his office. He says, hey, this little old lady's ready to sell her barbershop. She's in Middletown. He said, I think you should buy it. I said, really? You know, he's like, you're ready. He's like, you're as ready as you'll ever be. You know, you don't have to go work in a shop. You can do this. And so I went and met her, and we came to an agreement on what I was going to purchase the shop for. It was a small little 400 square foot shop, and I bought it before I even passed boards.
Wow.
So, you know, once you accrue your hours, they do testing once a month, and you just got to wait for your time to go do that test. And I bought it from her, and she agreed to stay on until the day I was going to take the test. So here I put immense pressure on myself. Hey, not only are you going to open your shop, you got to pass boards, because the scariest part about that was, well, if something happened and I didn't pass my boards, that shop was going to be empty for a whole month. And what I was hoping is that I could retain any of her older clients that she'd been cutting for years, because she had been there for like 20 years. And she was an older barber, and all of her clients were a lot older. And I'm saying, hey, man, you know, between my friends and family that I'm cutting, the clients that I have, I know I can meet overhead. These guys will be the extra, you know, if I can retain these people. Well, all of a sudden, if you don't pass, the shop's empty and the lights are turned off for a year. People are in there peeking the doors going, what's going on here? I guess I got to get a haircut somewhere else, and maybe they don't even come back. So a lot of pressure on me to do that. But thankfully, you know, delivered on the boards. Everything went great. Started cutting on Saturday. It was wild. You know, I actually had 2 women come in for a haircut that Saturday because she was a female barber. I was terrified. A lot of my friends came
You're
in
like
early.
four on the top, two on the
Man,
sides.
they were like, yeah, right. What are we doing today? I got bills to pay though, man. Fake it till you make it. I went in there, I cut their hair. One of them came back and I was like, hey, I appreciate you. I just don't think this is the fit.
That
She's
is
like, well, I
so
want to be a
funny.
handsome fellow. And I want to send you to
Was the name Handsome Fellows when you bought it, or was it?
No. So, it's interesting because I'd worked with a guy that was in school at this place down in Atlanta called the Creative Circus. And I'd met him at a wedding and he said, hey, this is really cool. The thing I'm going to school for is branding and marketing. He said, when you're going to do this, reach out to me. We're going to go through the whole exercise that I do in school. This is going to be great experience for me. It's going to be great for my book. And so I did. And he said, hey, what vibe are you going for? What pictures, share all these things with you. And we had come up with the name Fellows Barbershop, like a group of guys.
Mhm.
I loved it. It was short, simple, clean, to the point. Well, we realized then that there was a company out in California called Fellow Barber, which is like, hey, I'm your fellow barber. And they had copyrighted it and they had some product lines and a couple of really small shops in like New York and California. Anyway, they sent me a cease and desist shortly after. They said, hey, you're infringing on our name.
I'm
So-
still waiting on my cease and desist on Risky Business Podcast.
Yeah. Oh,
Sure.
yeah. Right. And I mean, they must pay some lawyer to do a check every month or
Yeah.
so. And regardless, it was probably the best thing that happened anyway. We said, let's just slap handsome in front of it. And I can't tell you how many times people come in and, can you make me a handsome fellow? And, a little boy gets his haircut. You're such a handsome fellow. It's
That's
just,
awesome.
It's catchy. It's great. It totally works. So yeah, we started with Fellows Barbershop originally and then transitioned to Handsome Fellows. It was such a long time ago. We're coming on up over 9 years now. But I started solo and man, just grinding it out every day.
So when you bought the shop, you were the only one
It was
cutting
just
in
me.
there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And try to keep her same hours. And at that point I was doing walk-ins. There were days where I might do 2 haircuts, and then there were days where week of Derby, maybe I did 23. And you just had to be there.
Mhm.
There's in an age where so many people work from home and so many people are mobile, this is not a model that works like that
Mhm.
anymore. You have to be there. You have to have availability.
There's no
And-
AI haircuts.
Yeah, and I hope hopefully not anytime soon. But let's say I close at 6:00, and man, at 5:45, 4 or 5 people would walk in. They got off work, and I'm like, oh man, now I'm not getting off till 8:30 or 9
Yeah.
o'clock. But guess what? I only did 2 haircuts earlier in the day. I got to
Yeah.
stay and get it done.
Yeah, of course.
But what started happening is I realized that it was just a really inefficient model. The walk-in model was, and a lot of our older clients were used to that. But I wanted predictability in my schedule. I wanted to look and see who was coming in that day and how many haircuts I had scheduled. And I wanted a steady stream instead of the morning rush,
Mhm.
the lunch rush, and then the after work rush. And then you're left twiddling your thumbs for 3 hours in between both of those. It just didn't make sense to me. And so I started doing some appointments on Saturday mornings. And I had a paper calendar and I had to answer the phone. And these people would call and I'd be mid-haircut. Handsome Fellows, hey, I want to book an appointment. Okay, cool, man. I got 8 a.m. Saturday morning. Write their name, write their number down, get back to my haircut. So it was a lot to manage. And I'm cutting hair and answer the phone and writing down the appointments. But hey, I'm making it work.
And taking walk-ins
Right,
when they walk
right.
in. Yeah.
So then it transitioned into, hey, I'm just going to give preferential treatment to appointments. I'm going to take appointments all day long now. So that was really hard because I'd have someone walk in and maybe they'd see one person sitting in the waiting area and they think, well, I got 30 minutes. And I go, hey, it's probably gonna be out an hour and a half. And they go, well, why would it be an hour and a half? Well, I've got him next, but I got somebody booked at 1 and 1:30. So that means, about 2 o'clock, I'll get to you. And they're
Mhm.
like, what are you talking about? And sometimes people would get upset
Yeah.
and they would leave and storm off. And some people, would be understanding. They'd be like, no problem. I'll come back then. All right, I'll pencil you in at 2 o'clock, man. And what I found was that for every person I lost in the old model of walk-ins, every older man that,
Mm-hmm.
kind of stormed off and said, this is a walk-in shop. What do you mean you're taking appointments? For every one of those guys I lost, I gained 5 clients that
Mhm.
valued their time. So the mom that wanted to get 3 kids cuts back to back to back and didn't want to have to wait there for 3 hours to offset them. Or the businessman that said, hey, I got a 30-minute lunch. I'm right down the street. I'll get down there. If you can get me locked in at 1 o'clock, I'll get a haircut, and then I'll be back at work, and nobody's the wiser. So, while I'm kind of growing, I'm starting to administer this, and then we just went full blown online appointments.
That's awesome.
I said, this is what we're gonna do, man. And this is after we'd had a couple barbers, and we were starting to really get some steam. And I said, we're gonna put the power in the customer's hands. I'm not gonna make them call. I'm not gonna make them wait anymore. They're gonna go online. They're gonna book their appointments. They're gonna get reminders, and then we'll see them when we see them. And things just really exploded then. And I also had a couple of good hires, Juan and Brandon, a couple of my first 2 barbers, man. Shout out to those guys. They took a chance on me. I took a chance on them, and it just worked out great. And things really started to snowball after we went to online appointments. And, one thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is, how do you get the talent in the door, right? The barbers behind the chairs.
How many barbers do you have now?
So we're up to 20.
Wow. Because you have 2 shops. You have St. Matthews and
shops.
Middletown.
Yeah, Middletown and St. Matt's. And what I would say is that it's really hard in the upcoming, the early days, because, I didn't really have a name for myself yet. It was just me in there grinding. You had to find some like-minded people. And I went through 4 or 5 different guys before I found the right ones that kind of shared my vision for what we were doing and where we were going. But after you get those first couple of people and things start steamrolling a little bit, talent attracts talent. And the barber community, like Louisville, it's a small community. Everybody talks. And the way I was doing things was very attractive for the barbers. I was doing a fixed booth rental rate, so they know what they're going to pay, whether they work 1 day a week or 7 days a week. I was giving most of them complete freedom with their schedules. So, hey, man, come in when you want to, leave when you want to. You can manage your schedule online. I'm not going to sit here and, micromanage you. Do what's best for you. Do what's best for your family. I'm certainly going to give you some advice on where I think you're going to get the most bang for your buck. But I was giving them freedom of that. I gave them a key. I said, hey, man, here's your key. If you want to come in and cut a buddy one night or whatever, that's no problem. You don't got to give me a heads up. And that word started traveling. And like your business, referrals is everything, right? So I had a really good relationship with the barber college to get new, fresh, young, motivated barbers. But you also want a good mix of seasoned barbers that maybe are at a shop that are saying, I really don't like where I'm at, but I don't know if there's anything better. And then next thing you know, they're talking to their buddy, hey, I'm working over here. Hey, I'm down to working 4 10-hour days instead of 5 8-hour days. And I'm making really good money. Ryan's super cool. We got big things happening. Then they want to join.
Well, and the brand you've built. You go back to your branding buddy who helped build it. I mean, the Handsome Fellas brand is one that everybody in Louisville knows about. At least in St. Matthews, Middletown area, it's a spot where you drive past all. I mean, I drive past it probably 10 times a week. Both shops.
And location is everything. Okay, so the first shop I was at, we were tucked back in this little strip mall. It was a really rough little shop at first. But I poured my heart and soul into that place, man. I was always doing something. I was painting, putting new floors in, putting new ceilings, making it mine, right? And man, I love that. Those early days were awesome. And then we outgrew that space. There were 5 of us in that small shop.
400 square feet. Wow.
Yeah, and I had forced myself to cut up in the front, almost in the waiting area, to make room for a new barber. And I had this, the lighting was really bad. I had this tripod ring light, and I kept backing up. It kept falling on my head. It was like, man, we got to get out of here. But 2 streets down from where I lived in Middletown and 2 streets down from the shop, there was this old gas station auto garage. And I told my wife every time we passed that, which was every day, and it's to the point where she was like, oh my gosh, Ryan. I said, hey, that would be the coolest shop if we could ever get in there. And it was really run down. It was really in bad shape. But we talked about it all the time. And next thing you know, people were leaving the 2 buildings that are over in that acre, and the auto shop left. And my wife took it upon herself to go in there and start doing some digging. And, she's not afraid to talk to people, to make relationships. She's a heavy networker. She ends up doing some digging and find out that a local businessman, Bill Etzkorn, who owned Etzkorn Collision Center.
I was just about to guess if it was the Etzkorn.
Super cool entrepreneur guy,
yeah,
man.
awesome.
He took over his dad's business, but he had a lot of big, grand ideas as well that people didn't really see the vision of early. And he took a risk to get one of the first paint booths in the city for cars. But anyway, he got into real estate later in his life. We find out he's gonna buy it. So then I'm talking to my, one of my clients one day, and they say, hey, I know his son. Let me give you his son's number. So next thing you know, I call his son. Hey, Brian, this is Ryan over, so-and-so gave me your number, and we're really interested in this building. And he's like, oh, that's my dad. He's going to do that. He's like, I'll give you his number. So I say, okay. And then I call him up, and he's kind of a gruffy guy. And hello. I said, hey, I own a barbershop down the street. Heard you're going to buy this building. Man, we would love to be in that garage with the garage doors and everything. And he says, yeah, we're a few months from that. I'll call you when the time comes. Oh, okay. And I'm like, well, that's that. I said, I don't know if it's going to happen, Carrie. And man, then one Saturday, he just walks in the shop and he sits down. I don't know who he is, but man, we're in there grinding. We're vibing. There's full in there. There's the energy. And he's like, I'm Bill. Hey man, what's going on? And he said, you still want to do the barbershop over? I said, yeah, I'd love to. He said, okay. He said, come talk to me Tuesday. I said, okay. And what he was doing, he was vetting me.
Mm-hmm.
He was seeing who I was, what the business was we were running, what the whole vibe was. I go in there on Tuesday, and he's got a lease for me to sign.
No way.
And he says, let's walk in here. Let's talk. Okay. He said, how do you see this place? I said, I don't know, man. I could put a station here. We need electric there. We need some lighting up there. We need to do an HVAC tube in the middle, this and that. He said, cool. He said, sign the lease. Let's do 5 years. I'm going to outfit this place just like you want it. We're going to put in new windows. We're going to put in new garage doors, and we'll put the electric wherever you want it. We'll paint it whatever you want. And that was that. And it's like, oh my gosh, what a turning point in my life. I've still got the voicemail saved from when he called me and told me to come and meet him. And he's like, we're going to sign the lease. Let's get this done.
That's awesome.
Because I knew it was a turning point in my life. I was at Mahonia down in Nulu when I got the call that it was confirmed. And something in my core knew this is a turning point. Because the space was 3 times as big. And now we're not tucked back in this corner where nobody can see us. Now we're on Shelbyville Road.
20,000 cars a day.
Boom, boom, boom. People are waiting at that light. Everybody sees you. And you don't understand how crucial location is until you have location. And if we could grow it from 1 to 5 barbers in that small space in the back of that corner, imagine what we're going to do in this space. And not many landlords would do what he did. They would give you what's called a vanilla box. Hey man, you got 4 walls, you got some paint, you're off to the races. The build out's on your own. And he didn't do that. I got to work with him every step of the way on what color we wanted the concrete poured, where we wanted the HVAC, the electric, the sconces. Do you want some fans here? You name it. And man, he's been a blessing to me. And I got an immense amount of respect for that man. And it was a really fun process too. And he's just an old school guy, where it wasn't as much about, I got to squeeze every dollar I can out of this guy. It's like, hey, I see in you some of me when I was younger, and I want to support you in your entrepreneurial, quest that you're going on.
That's awesome.
And he really poured into me, man. And that was a really special moment. And, we got in that big shop, and I hired a couple of other people that had been in the hopper for wanting to join. I said, I just don't have a spot.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sorry. Now all of a sudden I do. And things just exploded then. And we put 8 chairs in there from the get-go. We had 6 of them full. This was in 2019. So this was 3 years after I opened the original shop. And next thing you know, I got a couple of stations I could put in. I'm like, hey, there's a couple more people I want. So next I squeeze 1 more in. And then I squeeze another one. Now we got 11 chairs in this place. I mean, every ounce of real estate and square footage I've got, we try to put stations in because there were good quality barbers that wanted to work there, and the demand was there. And things just totally snowballed. But to backtrack just a smidge, when I originally bought the shop from that lady, I had to sign a new lease. And it was so dirt cheap. It was $600 a month. And he's like, well, how long of a lease do you want? I was like, how long of a lease do you want to give me?
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to be in here for a while.
Yeah.
I never really stepped into this whole industry saying, I want to build a huge shop. I want to build a multi-location shop. I just wanted to be happy. And I thought that I could find happiness in learning a trade, making relationships with people, and running my own business. The 20 barbers, the 2 locations was never part of the original plan. I signed a 7-year lease with that guy, right? Because I'm like, this is where it's going to be. And I'm okay with that. I'm content with that. I'll be happy with this. So, 3 years in, we had to sign a new year lease, and I had to sublease it for 4 years, which was a pain. But hey, man, we made it work. And things just exploded into that, and that was in 2019. And then here comes COVID. We've got all this tremendous momentum, and our industry got shut down for 10 weeks. And, you had people calling you, hey, man, I need a haircut. Can you come to my house? And people really started missing us. And you know what? We really started missing the people. We started missing the interactions. And, we kept it clean, though, and said, hey, we're not really supposed to be doing house calls or anything like that. And we waited, and I didn't get a haircut for the 10 weeks either. I was like, if you guys can't get one, I'm not going to get one either, which I missed it just as much as anybody.
I didn't realize it was 10 weeks.
Yeah. It was a long time.
Yeah. That's,
and you know what, man? I paid my rent every single month. It was due. I didn't ask for it to be deferred. I said, hey, this is my commitment. We're going to be back in this, Well, I didn't ask for booth rent from any of my guys, or the girl barbers. It's like, hey, you guys are on hard enough times as it is, but I was going to fulfill my end of that. And, that was just a matter of just pride in myself. I didn't want to kick that can down the road. Of course. So anyway, we come back, and I remember I'm sitting at sitting at the first chair, waiting between clients, and I'm looking at KCREA, Kentucky Commercial Real Estate, right? And there was this spot that it was in St. Matthews that I always thought was cool. And this was pre-COVID, but it was said it was for sale or for lease. But when we called upon it, they said, oh, we've already got a tenant. A deal's already done. I said, oh, bummer, man. That was a cool spot that I've had my eye on for years. Originally, when I was in Barber college, I wanted to be in St. Matthews. That was the first place I'd ever envisioned it. Middletown thing just kind of happened because it did. And then I'm thumbing through, and all of a sudden I see it's for sale again. We call up the people, and they say, yeah, there were several concepts, a lot of restaurants that want to get in this, but now is not the time for these places to do it, given COVID and given the circumstances. So it's available again. So again, life comes at you fast. That was on Monday. Called Bill. Said, hey, Bill, there's this building down in St. Matthews. It's pretty cool. Why don't we go look at it? Maybe we'll do another one. He said, okay, let's go there tomorrow. So we go there on Tuesday. We're looking at it. And it's an old bakery. And, it needs some love, too. It's been neglected, just like the other one. And I say, I like it, man. I think we can make it work. And I got this voicemail on my phone, too. It's the only 2 voicemails I have saved on my phone are the ones.
That's awesome.
And he calls me on Wednesday night. Hey, Ryan, we're going to buy the building. Come tomorrow. Let's talk about it. I said, oh, my gosh. And I hadn't even said, let's do it for sure. I said, this is cool. I think we can make it work. And he's like, we're going to buy it. So Thursday, I signed a lease. Friday, when they're walking around, we start knocking out walls. They start bracing it, man. So from Monday to Friday, all of a sudden we got one shop, and just right after COVID, and now Friday, we're in the process of making another shop.
That's awesome.
And, I would love to have bought it myself, but at that time, everyone was doing projects on their house. They were all doing home improvement projects because we were all spending tremendous amount of time at home, right? They were doing decks. They were finishing basements. You couldn't get a contractor to show up and do anything. He had his team. I knew he could turn it around quickly. I had a great relationship with him. So, hey, let's run it back. Let's do it again. And he had us up and running in a few months. And October 1 of 2020, we opened up St. Matthews.
That's awesome.
So, it's a testament to...
How many barbers are there? Is it 10 and 10?
No, Middletown's a little bit bigger. It's a little more favorable just in the layout. St. Matthews is a triangular building, so it doesn't really bode well for square stations. So we've got 8 stations in St. Matt's and 11 in Middletown.
That's awesome.
And I cut 2 days at both so I can bounce around and see everybody. But opportunity can come really quick, and you got to be ready for it. You can't waver. And that's part of knowing your playbook and having faith in yourself and faith in what you're doing to know that we can make this a success. And opportunity doesn't wait. Sometimes you see it and you got to snatch it up and seize it. And that's what we've done. And both great locations, both great visibility. A huge piece of this is just we got great barbers in there too. And I know one thing we talked about prep work was, how do you hire? And for me, soft skills is everything. I've had a lot of hires. I've got 20 barbers now. I don't know how many haven't worked out. but let's say 30 in general I've hired. Not one person did I have do a haircut for me. I didn't say, hey, come in here and bring a haircut. I wasn't really looking at pictures. What I was looking for was soft skills. Can you communicate with me? Can you look me in the eyes when we're talking right now? Are you going to be able to form a relationship with a client in a very small window and find some piece of common ground to form a connection with that person? Because barbering isn't just cutting hair. In fact, it's the complete opposite, man. It's forming a relationship. It's an experience of someone. And it's an extremely, back to the beginning when you talked about that statistic, it's an extremely loyal business. And people are loyal to their barbers because they're relationships. And the cliche of, hey, we're more connected than ever given technology, but we're more disconnected than ever really does ring true. And the beauty of barbering is that you get 30 minutes with someone where people aren't scrolling on their phones. Their intention's not diverted. There's real talk. Now, some people sit in the chair, they close their eyes, and you got to read the room and say, hey, this person just needs 30 minutes apiece, and I'm going to give it to them. And that's cool.
I definitely have those days. When
Yeah, and
like,
sometimes we need a break, too.
Yeah,
I'm doing 16 haircuts, man. Like, if 5 of you guys don't want to talk, that's awesome.
You can't
Right?
small talk about where you're going on vacation next 16 times that
so
day. You're
much.
like, oh.
Yes. Yeah, it's Groundhog Day, but
That's funny.
it's not just the skill of giving a great haircut. It's forming the relationship. Because for me, I get 30 minutes with my buddies, friends, and family where nobody's got a phone and we're just having real talk. And then the clients I've been cutting for 9 years, all the conversations we've been through, hey, I'm getting married this week.
Yeah, you've watched their kids grow
cool.
up.
Yeah.
You've done their haircut before the
Right.
wedding, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
People, hey, I lost my job. I'm going through a divorce. Hard times where they just need counsel. They just need someone to listen with an empathetic ear. But then you get all the exciting stuff too. And then you talk about the kids. 9 years, I had kids that were coming in that were sitting in booster seats. Now they're coming in, they're grown men with facial hair and deep voices. I hadn't seen this one kid in a long time, and he's going to Western Kentucky, and he's getting ready to do this bike ride from across the country. I think it's like 5,000 miles or something, but it's going to take 2 months for him. Hadn't seen him in so long because he'd been away at college. I said, Carter, man, you're huge now, And then we started talking about, he's like, I remember your first shop. I remember coming in there, and
That's so cool.
I remember too, man. And so it's a luxury. It's just so cool to be involved in people's lives and to be involved in big pivotal moments. And a lot of people are closer with their barbers than they are with other people.
Oh, for sure.
And it's a really great thing. But back to the hiring piece, the soft skills is everything. If you can talk to me and you can connect, then you're going to be fine. We'll teach you how to cut hair. The repetition, you'll get better. But I'm a big believer. There was a study done that was talking about when you place an employee or independent contractor, what have you, around other high performers. When you do that, they said, hey, their performance is going to increase by 15%. When you put them around a poor performer, their performance is going to decrease by 30%. And I don't know the details of what that could be in our shop, but I know for darn sure, man, when you put a new barber in there, or you put another barber that's new to the shop around a couple of the barbers that I have in there, and they're dishing out 10-star cuts, and they're like, man, I got to step it up. These people in here they're connecting with their clients, they're personable, and their cuts are fire. My general cut, is not going to cut it per se. And high tides raise all boats. And, Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And it is so true. And they talk about it, even if your circle of friends isn't inspiring you, it's not a circle, it's a cage, and big believer in that. And just in having good talent attracting talent, and then everybody challenging each other to step their game up, to not just go through the motions, because it's so easy to do that, and to not want to get better every day and do things that stretch you outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I love. I mean, it makes me think of a few quotes. I think I saw that study somewhere too. It was like if you're in an office, if you're in an office and you sit within 15 feet of somebody that's a high performer, your performance, which that's a wildly interesting stat. and it's just you are the sum of your 5 closest friends, and if your friends are pushing you
Right.
forward. And I had coffee with a guy this week, and we were just sitting down talking, and we hit on that exact point. And he was a guy, young guy in college, and
Mhm.
he reached out to me. He's back in town this summer. He's like, man, I don't know how I found your podcast. He's like, it
Yeah.
has challenged me so much. He was breaking down like individual things that were said about episodes like 8 episodes ago.
Right.
And he was like, what he said here. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was like, you must intently be listening. And he was
Yeah.
like, man, I love it. This is great. And he was just saying like, it's so fun because he was like his 4 or 5 friends. He's like, they all listen to it and they all love it. And I'm like, it's when you're surrounded by people who are pushing you forward, and whether it be a barbershop and guys who are learning to, like you said, not taking 2-hour lunch breaks and a smoke break between every single haircut,
Yep.
and learning how to, in real estate, I call it like taking something from an accidental business to an intentional business,
Mhm.
and to where it's your time's mapped out, you know what you're going to do. And obviously, I mean, when we get back to risk, I feel like we haven't said the word risk a ton in this, but there's
Right.
been a lot of risk that's been throughout your whole entire story, and the risk of putting yourself out there, building a brand,
Right.
and starting at the age of 30,
Yeah.
a new career, which is really cool. What's the next big risk on the horizon for you? Are you looking for new shop locations? Are you content with 2? Are you wanting to do more?
Right.
What's that look like?
Let me back it up one thing, because you're right.
Oh, of
We
course.
haven't said risk enough. And, I've been kind of telling my story, and it's just a snapshot, stopping corporate America, going to barber school,
Mhm.
right? Big risk. I didn't have a tremendous amount to lose. I didn't have 2 kids to feed, right? But I took a risk there, and said, maybe it's going to pan out. Maybe it's
Mm.
not. Buying the barbershop before I even graduated,
Mhm.
that's a pretty big risk.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's all calculated. Say, hey, I'm going to bet on myself. All right. That I am going to pass, and that this is going to work. Then moving into a bigger shop, 4 times the rent, 4 times
Mhm.
the size. Am I going to be able to fill this place? Hey man, you got to trust your playbook.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing well. It can scale. I know it can scale. After COVID, scariest time for any business owner.
Mhm.
3 months after, we're opening a second shop. We're doubling down, and that was a huge risk, but it was all possible because I knew what our secret sauce was.
Mhm.
I knew what our recipe was, and there's nothing overly proprietary about what I'm doing. Okay. Like, there's not any special code that we're doing. Anybody can go and see what we're doing, what the shop looks like, what we're pricing our services at, what service we're using to book our clients with online appointments at. They can go and do that, and they can carbon copy and do it themselves, right? But the proprietary part is the barbers that are there.
Mhm.
Okay. It's the way that I run things. It's the fact that I still cut hair 4 days a week. I'm still in the trenches with these guys. I'm a barber's barber. Okay. So when something happens with a client, or something frustrating happens and they need to vent, I truly understand what they're
Yeah,
going
it's
through.
not
Okay.
call Ryan on the
Yeah.
beach and catch him
And
at his,
right, and
at
I
his
take their
A-frame
back.
cabin.
Yeah,
He's out there
man.
all week.
I'm not an absentee owner, So the amazing barbers that we have are the thing that keep it going around. Now, I've set up a really strong culture there as far as what my expectations are. Hey, when someone walks in the door, we got to greet them. We got to greet them with a smile. In fact, if it's 10:25 and they're there for a 10:30 appointment and you don't have anybody in your chair, you're working early, get them in the chair early. Don't sit there and play on your phone and let them wait up there for another 5 minutes. They got stuff to do.
Mhm.
Get them in the chair. They know what my expectations are on Google reviews. Google reviews are so very vital for us. We got to make a good impression on people. I think we've got over 1,000 reviews now collectively between the 2 of them. And we've got a really high rating, like a 4.8. I mean, that's great. I take pride on that, but I know that plays into continually getting new and fresh faces in the shop, So that's kind of the secret sauce,
That's awesome.
right? And that's not easily something you can replicate, but it's something that's way downstream. A lot of people say, "Hey, man, you're not paying for me what I'm doing today. You're paying me for what I did 7 years ago when I was in there grinding by myself,
Yeah, of
wondering,
course.
am I going to get another cut today? Is anybody even going to show up?" Pumping the social media, pumping the brand, making sure I am getting good Google reviews. So that's
Hopefully the podcast will get you all these clips. You can
Man,
get on there and
that's great.
you can space them out over
Yeah,
time and have a
yeah.
lot of good content clipped
right.
in
That's right.
over time. And we even got, I feel like your colors are orange, correct? Well,
Yeah.
your branding color, so I feel like the vibe of this room kind of
we
matches
got
the
the
vibe
earthy tones
of your
going.
Instagram
We got
page.
the natural green, and we got the copper kind of color.
Yeah. My wife always tells me, she's like, your Instagram is not very aesthetic. I'm like, I'm not really
It's
going for an
true.
aesthetic
And
vibe.
no, it's aesthetic and it needs to be consistent too. Yeah, I know. I'm
mine's-
still learning that stuff. But as far as what's the future hold? We've got some goals, and Carrie and I, and we're ambitious, but I think they're attainable. But a lot of it just comes down to the right place at the right time. St. Matthew's shop, Middletown shop, both of those were no brainers.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we got to do this. Let's put our chips in, push our chips in. And, when the right place comes available, it might be something we'll dive into. But what we're not going to do is just start slapping them up just because we can. Hey, there's 750 square foot in this strip mall over here. There's decent traffic there.
Mm-hmm.
We can maybe put some barbers in there and get some customers. If we're not inspired by it, it's not worth doing. And we're not doing this strictly for the money. We're doing it for the legacy we're trying to build with the shop, and we're trying to keep that consistent. And it's not all about dollars and cents, and it's about experience, and it's about having cool, unique buildings,
Mm-hmm.
and also getting the right barbers. I've had barbers with me that have been with me for a super long time, and I treat them well, they treat me well, we all do well. They have a lot of free time with their family, and hey, can we attract more barbers like that too?
Mm-hmm.
And we just want to slap people behind the chair just because we've got a good brand that we can probably grow. So I hope that the right opportunity comes up at the right time. And you know what? I might get a phone call tomorrow from Bill.
Yeah,
Hey,
Mr. Edscorn's
We
ready
got
to
a
get
cool
another one for
building
you.
over here. You got to come take a look, and we might sign a lease tomorrow. I'm not saying that's
yeah, yeah.
happening, but
Yeah, I'm a Simpsonville native. I got some spots.
Yeah,
We'll talk
I
offline.
know,
I got
I
some
know,
spots for
I
you out
know.
there. It's
yeah.
we need a good barbershop out there.
Yeah, so you never know. But I can't stress the importance of just having a supportive partner
Mm.
in any kind of endeavor you're doing. Risk, because they're in it with you too. And if something happens at 9:00 at night and there's a situation I got to deal with immediately, even if we're getting ready to sit down at dinner, I go, hey, such and such happened. I got to do this. And she'll say, go take care of business. Right. And if I'm going to miss something with my kids, hey guys, I know we had this plan.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy's got to go to work. I got to take care of this, man. I'll make it up to you. I promise. But they're in the weeds with me too. And you've got to have somebody that supports you, and you've got to have somebody that understands you too. There's a reason why doctors, are married to nurses or other doctors, and lawyers marry lawyers, because they get each other. They understand what they're up against. And, when you come home and you're like, hey man, I had this really rough day, they're not just hearing you, they're listening, and they can truly understand, what you are up against with a sympathetic ear, and they can give you great advice. So, Carrie was in the hair industry. She had opened up a salon the same time I would open up a barbershop. And man, we really meshed on the entrepreneurial time of that. And I just can't stress, how important she's been in this whole journey too, keeping me sane, keeping me accountable.
Mm-hmm.
She'll tell me if she thinks maybe I'm overreaching for things, or maybe this is a little overly ambitious. But if I've got a vision and I'm inspired and I'm ready to do it, let's do it. Let's do it together. And that's, man, such a big piece. And when you're taking risk, because that can be a real stress on a relationship when you start taking something risky, and maybe the money starts drying up or starts taking up more of your time than you ever envisioned. To truly be in it together, what a big important piece too.
It's I think the same thing about my wife. I tell people, if she wasn't able to do what she does at home, I wouldn't be able to do anything I do, and that she just supports fully, and is just like, even when I'm like, hey, I want to start a podcast, is
Right.
behind it. And always, I'll walk into like the bathroom the other day, and she was like, listen to my podcast. I'm like, babe, that's so sweet. So Kathleen, if you're listening, you've made it 58 minutes into this one. Thank you so much. You hit on something there. One of my favorite things when people say, like, I wanted to start my own business because I wanted to be my own boss and create my own hours. And it's like, and then it clips to like working 90-hour weeks. And I think there's a sense of a lot of people want this was one of the reasons I started this podcast. Was I sat down with people, as in 2020, I was exploring on what I wanted to get into, and was looking at a few different roles and people who were successful. And as I sat down with them, I felt like anybody who was success they all had the same story of, hey, there was a grind season that was really tough.
Oh, yeah.
And there was 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, and it wasn't for the whole entire time. It was a planned time. And so that's been something I've taken away from it is it's not a bad thing to say like, hey, I'm in a grind season that is
Right.
I'm in the building stage of something that I'm building for the future.
Mhm.
And yeah, you're not gonna build something massive in 20 years by
Right.
saying, hey, it's 9 to 5. At 5 o'clock, I'm turning my phone off and I'm gonna be 5 days a week and that's it. I'm working 40 hours and I'm turning
Right.
and I'm off from there. But the goal is build something big to where you're not doing the 80-hour weeks in 20
Yeah.
years, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So then the question becomes, once you've achieved what you wanted to set out to do,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not even for what I set out to do, but what actually has happened, how do you stay hungry?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I love underdog movies. I love Rudy. I love Hoosiers. I love Moneyball. I cherish the underdog role. I'm a little brother, right? So I've had to fight for everything ever since I was little. And
Have you watched the David series on Amazon?
I have not.
It's really good.
I'm gonna have
It's
to add that to
obviously
the
it's
list.
the number one underdog story of all time. It's called House of David,
Yeah.
and we were in a Bible study and we started watching it for that. And I was like, I thought sometimes those shows are a little bit more corny, and I was like,
Mhm.
I don't know. And we started watching. I'm like, this is A, it's really good. B, it's like they took some liberties to kind of make some changes and
Yeah.
add some things to it and add some storylines. But it was the number one show on Amazon
Mm.
for a couple weeks, which is nuts, which is cool as a Christian to see people
Absolutely.
be intrigued by something that's obviously going to point people back to Scripture
Right.
and lead to Christ. And so it's it's if you're interested in
Okay.
underdog stories,
I need a
it's-
new one, man. I
Obviously,
need
you know
something
the
to rile
ending.
me up.
Obviously, you know the ending of that one, but
Right.
it's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how do we stay hungry?
Yeah.
That's constantly on my mind, is not being complacent.
Mm-hmm.
Content is a really tricky word in our language, because some people could say, hey, why are you content with just that? And then you're like, well, we need more, 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 more. But, the other side of it is, hey, I'm content. Life is really good for me
Mhm.
right now. I get a ton of time with my kids. I get a ton of time with my family. It's okay to be content too, but then you always got that fire in your belly of what's next, right?
Yeah.
The next endeavor. The last thing I'll say, and it's not anything that hasn't already been said on your podcast before, and there's so many cliches out there and famous lines, but for me, when you're playing cards, you start getting into a hand. I know you said you like to play cards.
Oh yeah.
And next thing you know, you got a bunch of chips in the middle, but you got a losing hand,
Yeah.
and you got to commit, hey, am I going to bluff it or what? But some people will use that term, you're pot committed. You
Yeah.
got to finish
Yeah.
this, right? Well, I was pot committed kind of at 30, okay? I went to high school, did great, went to college, did great, got these jobs, was doing okay, all right? But I put all my chips in education and corporate America.
Mm.
Go to school, get good grades, get a job with a good company with a good 401k and healthcare plan. That's all we were ever thinking about when we were in high school, That's all I ever poured into. And it's like, I'm pot committed at this point. I don't want to start from scratch again. Why would I want to go to zero, right? And sometimes you got to cut the cord and you got to say, I'm not putting any more of my chips in that, and I'm going to start back from scratch from what I got left, and I'm going to draw up another stack.
Mm.
And it's really scary. You talk about teachers, anybody that's trying to get a pension, right? They're like, well, I only got 7 years left. I already got 13 years here. I'm not going to restart over. And I understand that. And everybody's situation is different. But for me, at 30, it's like, man, I've got to do something different. I got to make a change. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's what I was doing. 4 or 5 different sales jobs, all the same thing, right? Not happy. Sunday at 6 o'clock, a pit in my stomach saying, dude, how am I going to wake up tomorrow and do this for another 5 days? I don't think I can. And eventually the pain exceeds the recreation. And you say, hey, I'm going to make a switch. I don't care what it is. And I'm going to take some chances. I'm going to take some risks. Calculate them. Make sure that it's not going to leave you on the side without a house or without lodging or whatever. Mitigate that risk, but you got to take it at some point,
I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was just saying I think one thing that cripples people in the ability to take risk is you get out of college, you get that job,
Mm-hmm.
and you say, okay, well, hey, I'm making X amount of money now, so I can buy that truck I always wanted. And they go get a $70,000 truck, and the payment's $1,200 or whatever it probably is on a $70,000 truck. And then they go, okay, well then, yeah, well now, I'm making good money. I'm single. I'm doing this, and okay, well let me go rent this place, and it's $2,500 a month. And then you look at it, and they're handcuffed to the job that they hate because they say, hey, I have these things I have to do. And so early on, when you're in the position of back to the poker analogy of saying, like, when you finish your last job, it's like you might have only had one ante left back for one small table that you had to say, hey, I only got a 25-cent ante left. Let me move it down to a lower scale table. But in the end, if you can keep your expenses low and you can say, it keeps you more fluid and more able to take risks, to where then when the opportunity comes up, and whatever you said, it was $6,500 or whatever it was to go to barber school. Obviously you didn't go leverage yourself out crazy when you did have those jobs in order to say, like, hey, I got $6,500 to go drop on barber school and make an investment in myself in the future. And so as we wrap, a challenge to people listening, that obviously you've heard, I tell people I'm right in between Dave Ramsey and is it Robert Kiyosaki, the 4 Quadrants guy, and Rich Dad Poor Dad. He wrote both of those, but find myself in the middle of that. Obviously taking risk is fantastic, but obviously doing it with a mindset of not over leveraging yourself. So it's man, I've enjoyed this so much. Thanks for sitting down. Your story is awesome. If you're in Louisville, as you drive by through Middletown, or don't drop in because there's no walk-ins. I've made that mistake before. Book an appointment online. Ryan's easy to find. I mean, what's your social media handle?
Barber Ryko. But yeah, you can find Handsome Fellows Barber on Instagram.
Yeah. Book your appointment on there. Make sure when you finish, go leave a Google review. Boom. 5 stars. If it's not going to be 5 stars, don't leave it.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, it means a lot that you took the time to come sit down here, and have a lot of respect for your business and what you've built. And it's cool that you have 20 people that you're getting to impact, build their business, because it's almost like they're all solo entrepreneurs as well. And also build your brand, and seeing the importance that you have in the camaraderie, also just the brand that you've built is really, really cool. So I know you'll inspire some people today.
Don't be scared to enter a trade.
Yeah.
Don't think it's going to be frowned upon. Some people might turn their nose up at it, but like you said in the beginning, man, there are people that are coming out and making 6 figures, and it is true. Mm-hmm. It is a real thing. And there's a huge demand for trades. And there's something about having a skill that no one can ever take away from you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're young, or even if you're 30,
people always need haircuts.
Yeah, man. And they always will. And they're always going to need plumbers, electricians, and welders, and HVAC. Yep. So consider that. It is a real, really good path.
And if you're a barber out there and you're in the middle of barber school and you're looking to, Ryan's a great guy to reach out to, and find a spot at this. Maybe he's got all his spots full now. But his next shop that he opens up, hopefully in Simpsonville.
Boom. Let's do it.
Thanks, Ryan.